So, Molly, congratulations. I mean, this is a very, very rich, substantial, textured exhibition, conceptually very rich, also in materials, very, very rich. And it's not an overload because you've taken us on a journey. So, once you enter the journey, and of course, you were my guide, so I just followed it. And I love the way there was a progression from, concepts that are almost immaterial, you can't grasp them, they're invisible, and then it becomes very material, it becomes very corporeal into, let's say, the Ram Leelas and the Nakkataya and all of that. So how it started, that whole, spectrum of Leela, this conceptual spectrum of Leela, this is, I think, obviously very important for you.
Yeah.
You wanted to get that. So where do you start actually? When you say Leela, you have a panel, you have that installation, the ripples, and so could you begin just by mapping the conceptual journey?
See, for me, when I looked at, and it's not just for me because I was looking at Tulsi's text, and Tulsi definitely talks about the mind lake, and he also talks about that the possibility to dive into this lake can only happen through grace.
Okay.
And that grace comes from, of course, is Nirgun and Sagun, both forms of Ram.
Okay.
And so I wanted to look at this Manas, and I was also wanted to look at Leela as a much broader cosmic concept, because when we talk of Leela, before we come to Avatar Leela,
Yes.
we have the creation itself as Leela.
Leela, yeah.
And I'm actually never very happy with this, translation of a divine sport.
Yes.
There is a spontaneity and a playfulness, but
Yeah.
it's not like a game.
It's not a game.
It's
Yeah,
not a
that's
game,
right,
yeah.
right.
So, so what is this Leela is what I was, really looking for. And then I read the Laghu Yog Vishish Ramayana, and there this whole thing of the pure intelligence or the cosmic. So what we have, the Advait,
Yes.
Shuddh Advait is coming there. And that itself creates the reality. And I was also struggling with these two ideas of Maya and Leela.
Okay.
And somehow when I was reading Yog Vishisht, and maybe none of the Pandits and the Sanskritists would agree, but I was looking at it more like a anthropologist maybe, or a folklorist, or a person into performance study. So how is Maya and Leela? It's they
And
considered
these
to be
concepts
separate.
are there, you would say, at a very early stage, this
They are
kind of
there,
concept.
yeah, right from the Rig Veda. So even if you
Yeah.
will read the text that I have created for the exhibition, they start with the Rig Veda, they come to
Yes.
the Upanishads,
Right.
and then they come to the Puranas.
Okay.
So and you can see a kind of a continuity of thought,
Yes.
which is also evolving, and it's also like going in multiple directions.
Yeah.
But just because it's going into multiple directions doesn't,
doesn't mean
there's
there
a
is not-
discontinuity.
yeah.
So if you have Shabd here, you have Shabd there, you have the whole concept of Vak coming. So looking at those, and looking at the whole thing of what this Manas or what this supreme consciousness is, the word that is used is Brahm.
I see.
And Brahm is also Nirgun. It is formless. It is beyond form and formlessness.
Right.
And it is also qualified.
Okay.
And so I looked at different ways of talking about that, and wanted to relate it with Manas, and Manas as consciousness, and also Manas as Tulsi.
So Manas is very important.
So
Tulsi
Manas
became
is
the
very important.
That was your, in a sense, your springboard. This is where
From
you.
where I kind of developed the idea of then within the scriptures itself, within the traditional discourse, philosophical discourse itself, is that the first manifestation is the word.
Okay.
In the mind, in the supreme reality, or Brahm, or whatever we want to call. So even Vak, the Shabd herself, Vak becomes Brahm. So we have the
Right.
concept of Shabd, Brahm, and we have of Vak Brahm. And then from the word the universe is created. And that's not exclusive to Indian
Not
tradition.
at all.
We have it all over the world, that the
But
primacy
there are
of the
different
word.
kinds of words, like the unarticulated word, the silent word, the
Yeah,
word.
so the word in the beginning is with you, like even the earlier text of Bible says. So the word is within you or with you, you know. Or we say Vak was with Prajapati, or Vak herself was. So this Shabd is in the cosmos.
Right.
Okay, and then it kind of manifests itself. And when it manifests, then it can be human speech, for
Yes.
example, it's the animal speech, it's the musical. So the whole notion of Dhwani comes.
Okay.
And I think right from the Rig Veda onwards, you know, our scholars have concentrated, I mean, they've kind of thought of the sound so much and give at such deeper and multiple levels. And then, of course, we come to the grammarians.
Yeah.
And so the whole concept of the Brahm, the Shabda, which is Anahat, and the Ahat. So the cosmic sound is Anahat, the vibration arising from within the cosmic. This thing is because it's not struck.
Okay.
But the struck sound and the audible sound. But then the grammarians go on to say that even Dhwani or the sound, unless it is a meaningful pattern, you know. So where do then obviously your music comes and your human speech with all its linguistic potential comes, and how do we kind of then
So what
show
was
it?
summoned, like we are sitting around with drums in our background, so this comes fairly early as struck sound.
Absolutely,
You know, this is the
yeah.
struck sound but what is the meaning would be hard
Well,
to.
the first sound comes from the Damaru. So we all
Okay.
know the Anahat, you
Okay.
know, or we say in Urdu and Punjabi, you have the Anhadnad.
Yeah.
So it is the eternal sound, and it's also the sound of creation.
Okay.
So the moment this, you know, this sound gets articulated, the manifest forms begin to appear. You know,
Okay.
so the universe begins to take shape. Earlier, like you have 2-3 hymns that you know can be called purely creation hymns, so there are many of them. But I focused on Vak as one because manifestation of speeches, and where Vak declares, you know, that she is the Lord and she is the
Okay.
Brahman and this world, and she is at the summit, you know, where she creates the Father.
Does Vak
So
get
she
personified at any?
Yeah, Vak begins to get personified even in this hymn, but then also later she becomes as a consort of Prajapati.
Okay.
And then she's also kind of, you know, the concept of Saraswati and
Okay.
Vak. So later period we have Vak Saraswati, Saraswati Vak. So you also saw in the Madhubani style the whole. And you have this whole concept even in the Agmas, you know, especially. So you have the Malini and you have the Matrika. So all these are manifest
Okay.
forms and personified forms of Vak Brahman
Okay.
in the other sense, if we speak. So how does one show that meaningful sound, and how
Yeah.
does one relate it to also, because the exhibition will also be is about Ramayana. So we thought that we should get all these instruments that are used, you know,
For different performances.
singing of Ram Katha.
Yeah.
They come from the temple tradition.
Yeah.
They are used in the Ram Nam. So
I
they
was
are
very struck by
Khalta.
the Ramnamis and just the way the akshar, the actual letter, you know, is almost like a later stage, you know, where the naming of.
Yeah, I mean, because you know, when the Dhwani, the Vani, the Vak is there, and probably you'll see a panel in which, you know, the gods are telling Indra to a kind of how to capture, because it's ephemeral and it has to be bound in
Yeah.
order to be. So we also have this whole concept of Akshar Brahm.
Akshar Brahm.
And there are two opinions to it. Like, you know, they say, some would say that Akshar Brahm has got nothing to do with the Varnamala, with the alphabets. It has got to do with the imperishable. But on the other hand, the imperishable is really the tangible form in which it
Absolutely.
begins to appear. So some consider the, you know, so we kind of then tried to, from Dhwani, in any case, the manifest word has two forms,
Sure.
articulated and
Sure.
written.
Sure.
So we entered into the world of the form,
Yes.
where you have the shape,
Yes.
but the fully developed form as roop has to come later.
Yeah. Okay.
So we kind of, try.
How would you translate roop? What is roop? Because is
I
it
think
some
with
kind
roop, it comes is also, yeah. I would look at it in two ways. I mean, not that I'm looking at it, but the way it's being
Yeah.
looked is that one is the whole notion of the aesthetics
Okay.
that is being built into the developed constituted form. So it is the reflection within and contemplation on an ideational form.
Okay.
That then our artists translate into. So it's not like, I've seen an animal, so I have to
Yeah.
give you a realistic
Yeah,
animal
yeah.
figure of. So
It's the idea of that
it is the
animal.
presence of
Yeah.
of what you think,
Yes.
of what the reality is, or what the shape is that the roop will develop. But when we come to Naam, that is where the stage comes where you begin to identify things with names and with forms, and to some form comes before and Naam comes later. But for Tulsi, Naam is like, you have this Buddha, Chaturbhuj Buddha, which is the one of the Dashavatara, and you have his whole
body is
body
completely
in Ram Naam.
Yeah.
And then you have Ram and Lakshman
Also
and
covered
Hanuman
with-
himself covered all with, Ram
How did you
Naam.
find those particular paintings? Did you hunt for them, or did they just?
See, I didn't know that they were. I had no idea that I'll find a painting
Like
with
that,
Ram Naam.
yeah.
But I was looking for
All
Naam
this.
section, so I was looking at. And the first thing that came to my mind were the Ram Namis, and you have a.
Which is a
you
beautiful
have a
photo.
blow up of, and their
Very
dresses,
extraordinary.
which is their whole body is.
I think that's what I
Ram
like
Naam.
in the exhibition. It's not an overkill. Like you just have basically 3 images there, and it says it all. They speak
yeah,
for themselves. They
absolutely.
make the connection is made. So after this Akshar, Naam, depending on how you place them, Roop is the next.
Then comes the roop, and where then I have concentrated, because like Tulsi, for me in the center is Ram. So
Yeah.
it's all emanating, and he is both the supreme reality, the supreme consciousness, you want to call it, the supreme manas,
Yes.
from which everything is emanating. So the universe becomes his emanation, so his roop. So
Yes.
basically the entire manifest reality is also his roop.
Okay.
And then I kind of make an iconography of him as a roop, where you have the whole concept of this entire cosmic Leela that we have traveled till the level of Naam. And Roop also gets translated into Avatar Leela.
Okay.
And that is when the Sagun Brahm appears,
okay,
and which appears as again as an act of grace,
Yeah.
it comes from Bhakti, and because the Bhaktas, want that form. And for Tulsi and most of the Dvait and the Vaishnava thing would be that Sagun, and the worship and devotion to Sagun is the most... it's highest of the Purusharthas, and not even those 4 Purusharthas which become adjunct to it. And so we travel, and then Naam and Roop and Avatar has come,
Yes.
and he's performed deeds,
Yes.
he's done things,
Yeah.
and there is his Leela, and that is then becomes a Katha.
Yes.
Either we use the word Charit, so Ram Charit or Ram Katha, and then we begin to
Yes.
sing the
Yes.
glories.
Okay.
And the glory of the name is sung through his,
Okay.
glorifying the deeds. And this katha develops of the Avatar Purusha.
Okay.
So you have a Nitya Leela going on in any case, and you have the Avatar Leela. And then you begin to also perform.
Yes.
Because in the Bhakti tradition you have, Leela Smaran, Leela Darshan, and Leela Anukaran. So these are all these, in the Vaishnava thought you have these concepts. And then that Leela actually happens on stage also.
Yes, and in public spaces.
And I don't mean by stage a proscenium
No,
stage.
no,
but
just
it's
any.
People play roles, like in Bhagavad the gopis are doing. So the actors here. Uh, if for a moment I don't go into the politics of the
No.
emergence of these traditions, I'm only looking at it from the
Yes.
concept of my
I get
Leela
it.
that is coming, is that that's a moment where the aesthetic bliss can lead to the bliss of the Supreme.
Yes.
And that is the reason that in Vaishnava theology, you never want to be liberated. There's never a desire for complete merger.
Okay.
So they want that there is a dual, there is something which can be tasted, whose essence can be. So that Leela Purush or that Avatar Purush or his Charit, performing or watching or singing, which is part of the music or any performance, is that where you have the Goswamis and which take you to that whole Rasa Shastra. They even bring in the Natya Shastra thing and develop this whole notion of how the Rasanubhuti or Rasa Swad leads to Brahm Swad, which is tasting of the supreme bliss. And that's the role of the Leela, which started as, and even the cosmic or the creative Leela, the notion is of Sat Chit Anand.
Yes.
So bliss,
Yeah.
consciousness, truth. So you are being given to experience
Yes,
that
yes.
bliss of the life itself,
Yeah.
which has been created by the supreme intelligence or supreme consciousness or Brahma. The Leela being performed, the God Himself manifesting is another bliss. Is as also so that the bhakta can actually in the real one-to-one can enjoy the blissful nature
Absolutely.
of that.
Yeah.
And performing of Leela again is to enjoy that bliss. And the goal of the bhakti is to remain in that bliss forever. So when you have the Leela, you have that moment then when you can transcend. It can happen directly as the Ram Leela, but I'm also taking it little away from the actual Leela Anukaran to what other spaces
Yes.
that the performance of Leela can give us. And that is, I think, when we go to the Nakatayas.
Nakataya. That
Yeah.
was something. See, for me, I don't have the knowledge that you have, but it's if you move from an almost invisible, ineffable, some ripple of energy, which becomes unarticulated sound, letter, name, etc., and then it grows, and there's katha, and see, when you end this exhibition, you use a lot of audiovisual materials, so that's very thick and it's very corporeal, and you just have crowds and crowds of people, so it's not a stage, it's the street actually that becomes the site of the Leela and the narrow gullies of Banaras and so on. And the Nakataya in particular, which you juxtapose with that, is particularly strong. It's almost like, and you keep using the word, we all use this word joy. There's a lot of joy, and with the joy, there's a whole lot of other, this is not some, very abstracted spiritual joy. It's a very earthy, corporeal kind of merriment, and with all kinds, especially in the Nakataya, you have all kinds of floats, you have tableau, and some of them are pretty violent. They're demonic figures out there. So how do you relate all this? Is the demonic yet another manifestation of?
Absolutely, I think
joy.
they wouldn't. Ram wouldn't have had a need to come if there wasn't a Ravan,
Right,
for example.
right.
So that reality
Yeah.
is it's
indissolubly
simultaneity.
linked.
So it has to be, and both. Then even if we go further into that, both are actually aspect of my own self, or it's the
Okay.
aspect of the universe. So demonic is not treated as something separate
No,
from or
it's-
different from
Yeah.
you. In a very interesting ways, that demonic is actually incorporated back into these spaces which
yeah.
are divine and sublime and So demonic exists, or the potential is always there. In the demonic itself is the potential for the sublime, and within the sublime is the potential for the demonic. And I think Ram Leela in its totality is able to capture that. And I have one of these video projections in which you see different forms of kathas, and the katha is narrated many ways. Then you have various kind of leelas, in which again you will see a difference between, say, a Ramnagar presentation and Kheria Ki Ram Leela film that you have seen, for example. Or you even go to a Nukkad Ram Leela in Delhi. It's so, but I would not say that, it's degenerated.
No, not at all.
I would not say that, because I think the Leela itself provides for these spaces. And like they say that you see the God in the form that your own. So I think these spaces provide. And one of that way of providing that space is the space for the subversion of inversion of all meanings. It's not maybe if it's not really subversion, but inversions definitely take place at the same space where Ram Leela is happening. But here we are moving on to away from that center nucleus where the drama was happening, and we are spreading out from there. And again, even Tulsi's text itself gives us this clue when we're doing the Nakatayas. She, interestingly, she's a eunuch I don't know why.
And Shurpanakha is the figure.
Shurpanakha is the figure, and it's the transgender who has to. And of course, a lot of feminist interpretations
can interpret it in a certain way.
In a certain way, and they all. I mean, I agree with them to a large extent, but for me, I'm not looking at it as a gendered reality.
No.
For me, like, she's a raw energy, because that is why you also have the Kalis coming in, You have the Durgas, you have the Chamundas. So one way is the death, of course, but then, we have Chinmatsa Masta figure. So from that very death, the life is originating. So to bring this all and let them it's a mayhem that they're creating on the streets of
Would
Banaras.
You say this is I'm always very wary of, simplistic translations, but this word carnival, as you know, has been used so much. Is Nakataya carnivalesque, would you say? Is it something like carnival?
For me, I mean, it has elements both of the carnival and the carnivalesque, if we look it into the entire context of the Ram Leela, but carnivalesque more. And that is why I have mentioned this. I think it is also because I don't know what word we have for carnivalesque, but I'm sure there must be. In which, the very visceral...
Excess.
You
use that, the excess of...
almost to the point of saturating visual imagery of the body. And the materiality, and it's like
it's an abandoned, they're thrown.
And that moment, the sublime begins to coexist, because I think the boundaries kind of, completely obliterated, and a possibility, both according to the tradition and according to how I look at it, that this possibility of flowering of faith.
See, what I'm trying, from the little I know, let's say, of a Ram Leela in Ramnagar and the Nakataya, which is also going on in Banaras. In Ram Leela, Ramnagar, whatever the enactments may be, there's always that auspicious moment of Arti. That Arti is hugely important. And when we are using a word like sublime, I can somehow link it to that moment where they're totally iconic figures and they lit up at flares and all. Here, I don't know, I haven't seen it, but in Nakataya, there's no Arti as such. It's a moving...
it is I think the flowering of the faith does not happen in the procession as such, but what makes it possible is that it's an allusion to the fact that within this materiality itself, the possibility of different kind of meanings. After all, it is this jalus only where people are coming and they're also doing puja.
Yes.
And,
There's a multitude of responses.
Multitude of this, that's thrown into it. So I am taking Nakataya here as more as a metaphor to look into my journey of how I understand the cosmic or the material. Not to say that, but Nakataya provides for many other kinds of meaning. Nakatayas and the Chowkis of Allahabad, for example, they were attempts by the British to ban them, and because they were religious spaces, they couldn't suppress them entirely. Which were doing this Jallianwala Bagh floats, and then they were doing,
it opens spaces for those other kinds.
So it opens spaces for all kinds of meaning, and depending on my own disposition, I will take meaning out of it. I can because it is fluid, it's open. I could be there with the float of my own in the way I want to be.
It's very fluid. It's very, very fluid. And whereas a lot of, if we look at it, dramaturgically is very limited, but if we look at, let's say, Bharat Milap, and how Bharat Milap in that beautiful rendering that we saw, there is a movement where Ram and Lakshman run through the crowds and that's an extraordinary movement. But then the actual embrace is very, very, it's stylized. It's a jhaki. And so it's not. Now I wanted to ask you a question. This concept of Leela.
I want to talk a little bit about the jhaki also, because there is. Actually, the scholars have put this, and you also, your traditionalists do tell you that the first origin of the vision for Tulsi, from where there are, the Ram Leela was performed probably prior to him, because we have the Valmiki's Ramayana being performed, and he may have then shifted it, is this vision. So, even Nakataya is just a mobile vision. And because it's a mobile vision, it's disorienting.
Yes.
In that sense. And
there's no one center, there's no one point.
But for Ram Leela, the jhaki is the most important. You could have no Leela at all. People are not there for the dialogues. People are not there for the gestures.
It's just that glimpse,
it's that glimpse. It's the darshan. And that is why it leads you back into the Rasa Shastra theory.
Yes, it does.
And there are these sadhus, who are just sitting there and they're going like they're in an ecstasy, just looking at those swarupas. People following these swarupas to another place are in ecstasy. It's not to say that, the other world does not exist, but that possibility of all the experiences to exist in simultaneity is what these performances
and it's also a moment. It's also the time, that one moment of time where you transcend that particular worldliness.
Like for more than 200 years, the Bharat Milap, Nati Imli Bharat Milap, have only pointed at that 445, that one particular. And they will tell you that no matter if it's raining, no matter if there are clouds.
You have to do it at that time.
No. I mean, the sky just, clears. Clears. And for 200, more than that, because if it's happening since the time of Tulsi's disciple Megha Bhagat, who was the first one, because he failed to recognize the vision when it appeared first time. And then Ram said, okay, Sri Ram said, okay, you kind of, do the Nati Imli Bharat Milap, and I will be present there. So then, as you will see this Leela Anukaran, there are these, manuscripts in which then they Gautam Chandrika and all, where then they talk about, that Megha Bhagat actually passed away. He organized this, and that moment when he beheld the sight He couldn't take it anymore, so he was gone. And since then, 4:45, and it's from the western side, the rays fall directly on the Swarupa. So even as a
Yeah.
theatrical
Absolutely,
device,
absolutely.
it's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
And
Yeah,
it's
the calculations.
that particular
Yeah.
moment that
Yeah.
brings
Yeah.
millions and millions of people, and they all feel that well, they've had the vision.
Yeah,
today.
it's an incredible orchestration of
Yeah, and
multiple
all it is
forces.
there is the four brothers
Yeah,
are standing still.
that's all.
That's all.
Now, my question was, if we are dealing with this very broad conception of Leela, specifically in relation to Ramayana, how would it have been different, for example, if you had worked on the figure of Krishna? Would it have been different, or do you think Leela is Leela, common to all gods in a way?
I think, the possibility of exploration with Krishna even grows much larger. Because Ram is Maryada Purushottam. He's
Right.
not Leela Purush.
Right.
But Krishna is Leela
Exactly,
Purush.
exactly.
And I mean, his Leelas are enormous. They're countless. But the beginning is the same. And the end is also the
same, yeah.
And in between, whatever
manifestations
Leela they want
are different,
to do,
yeah.
Yeah,
It
so
would probably be-
Krishna is very
Yeah.
difficult to
Yeah.
pin down
Yeah,
in a singular
yeah,
exhibition. But somehow, like I wanted to show, that Krishna and Ram and whatever avatar Purush that have been, or the emanations of Vishnu or emanation of Ram, or according to Krishna theology, emanation of Krishna, that is universal, that they won.
Yes.
And so in my dham, because after bhakti, what is the goal of the bhakti? The goal and the end are both bhakti, but in the cosmic abode of
Yeah.
Of eternal Leela,
Yeah.
Nitya Leela. Of
And that's where you
Krishna is
end, you
happening.
more or less end your
And at
exhibition
so
at
I
the.
have the dham, so I have this temple, I have this mandir. And I also wanted to bring it because it is this form that people worship today.
Yes.
It's the Jaipur marble images of which are all over, and it has its own aesthetics and beauty and a kind of rasa that it kind of brings forth. But I call the Shingarya the person from Vrindavan.
Okay.
Okay, I have the images of. So I wanted to
Some
merge.
kind of some
so
kind of
there is
merging.
So you see Ram and
Yeah.
you see Krishna
Yeah.
both in that.
Yeah.
And then you end in because ultimately then I'm showing you that Sri Ram is gone into Saryu and Sita ji is gone into.
Yeah, those were
Earth.
through two paintings,
and then
basically.
You have,
Yeah.
and then you enter in and you have Arpana's body is a garment.
Yeah.
And then you are back to the void. So where your journey started.
Yeah. And that beautiful quote which you said is to be found across many texts on
is
infinity.
That, that from infinite the infinite emerges.
And even
what
the remained
remains
is also
the
infinite.
infinite.
So that's
that's the Leela.
That's the Leela, yeah. So it's a very conceptual framing, you would say, and going through different modes of expression and.
And I think me as a believer, it helps me relate to it.
yeah.
See, if I was just approaching the whole thing as a purely academic experience,
Yes, it wouldn't
maybe it
work.
will take me to different spaces.
Yeah.
But since I approach it,
No, that's
with
why I
the-
feel, although it's a very massive kind of journey that you've taken us
it's
on.
a very intimate.
It's
journey.
intimate.
It's very
It's
intimate
not.
journey.
It's not an overkill. You don't feel exhausted at the end of it all. You're curious. Of course, you need, as I said, I had you as a guide, so it helps a lot because you were able to relate. But just in terms of selection, I mean, I'm just seeing it curatorially that it's very, very fine in its selection, and that's a very personal choice. You turned. It wasn't like you weren't trying to be encyclopedic about the whole thing.
Yeah,
You can't,
and you can't be,
no, Leela will be
you're
destroyed.
restricted by,
Yeah,
yeah.
it'll be
And
destroyed.
if it's really continuous Leela, how much can you be inside?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the breadth, length and breadth of this country and the forms that exist. It's not possible. It's not possible.
Tell me, you've done perhaps more than anyone I know. You've really worked on different Leelas, different Ram Leelas, let's just put it, and which is a very important thing, because more often than not, scholarship, as you know, such as it is, has focused only on the Ramnagar Ram Leela for the most part, you know. So by opening up all these different Leelas, you know, and they're different stagings, they're different manifestations, you know, and that's in a way the Maya for me. That's the illusion of it all, you know, what costumes they're wearing, you know, the kind of headgear that a Ravan might be wearing. But what would be, and I just want, because I'm a performance scholar, that what do you think are the essential components of these Leelas across the Ram Leelas that you've seen? You've seen how many? Could you just spell them out? Because
I don't know. I have
Madhubani,
got them staged here. I've gone around to see
Firstly,
them.
okay, when you stage them, let's begin with a concrete
Then we
thing.
staged here, yeah.
What happens to the Leela? Do you think that you can really do a Leela outside its habitat, its actual location?
You can do depending on what kind of audience you have. Because I don't think that Leela Leela happens because it has to communicate to someone,
Yeah.
you know, and so the Shrota has to be there. Now, if that Shrota happens to be a spectator participant, Leela can happen anywhere, like any other performance,
Right.
for that matter. But it doesn't happen because, you know, these stages are too huge. And my mandalis are coming from village spaces where they probably don't even use a stage.
No.
Or they're so overwhelmed
By
by
the city and
the glamour of the lights
Yeah.
and this and, you know. So somewhere that aesthetics of performance gets lost, you know. That is so probably, but there is no other way
No.
of documenting. If you want to document one whole month, no funding agency has so much money to, you know, each Leela, maybe one, maybe two can be done, but you can't do it for
all.
like,
No.
you know, like we did for Ramnagar Ram Leela and Keria Ram Leela we did, which are
Yeah.
completely two different kind of Ram Leelas. But, you know, even as a performance, it would still remain a religious experience. Even in the most base, that,
Okay.
you know, within quotes, Ram Leela, as you say, Jhankis, the Swarupas, and the Arti is important. So even when an audience is, you know, of completely drunkard men, because I've been told about in Haryana, you know, so there's a lot of laughter happening, a lot of jokes, and, you know, can be very, very raunchy, rustic, whatever. But that moment the audience waits. Even
Yes.
in Ramnagar Ram Leela, when we say it's a carnival, it's a mela, and people are all over, kha rahe hain, samosa kha rahe hain. You know, there is that one particular
moment when
and Ram Leela survives because of that one moment. Because there is no reason, when you have TV, when you have theatre, every other form has died. But come Navratra,
That
and
will
you
be
have
there.
Ram Leelas all over.
Yes.
So it's, and like one of the women in the Ramnagar Ram Leela documentation says कि हमारे Ram आए हैं
Yeah,
घर.
it's that
You
really.
know, and or Linda Hess's guy says कि सब खत्म हो गया, Ram चले गए, सब खत्म. So I think even as a performance, this whole thing of the still image
Yes, that's really important.
is very, very important. And then you know, we call it sakshatkar, your face-to-face encountering with that image, and then bursting into this celebration with an arti
Yes, yes.
is what makes
That's what
the
makes
Leela
it.
stay.
And you feel across the Leelas you've seen,
Across
this is the
Leela,
moment, this is the one
this
moment.
Across Leela,
Okay.
this is one moment.
Yeah.
You can transform everything else
Yes,
in Leela.
yeah.
But this
This has
This
to
has
be
been
the
continuing from the day
Yeah.
the Bhagat and the Jhankis begin to happen from the temple.
This is the real point of it
into
all.
the-
This is
yeah.
what it's all about,
It's-
essentially. In terms of narrative, I'm just wondering, when I saw your Keria Ram Leela, I was very struck, let's say, by the insertion of Sulochana. Because I had never really thought of Sulochana as being very integral. But in the Keria Ram Leela, she's a very important figure, a very significant performance time given to her. So I'm curious, how does this come about just through local kind of interests, investments? We want Sulochana, but perhaps not Shabri, or we don't want...
No, that's not true. I mean, because when I'm making a film, it's not that the Ram Leela has given them the time.
You've given
time.
them the
It's
time.
like
You've given them the time. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's...
But the fact ultimately is that Ramcharitmanas is not the performing text.
No.
It's at the heart of
Yes,
the Ram
yeah,
Leela.
yeah.
You're singing even in the Ramnagar Ram Leela. You have Bhartendu
Absolutely.
there, you have the Keshav Chandra's Ramchandrika
Yes,
that.
yeah.
And for the rest, you have Radhesham Kathavachak,
Yes.
you have a Yashwant Singh. And they borrowed from various traditions.
Right.
And if Tulsi was taking the philosophy from Adhyatam Ramayana, the Ram Leelas were drawing from Anand Ramayana.
Okay.
Okay, so Anand Ramayana has this fully developed Sulochana. He has a fully developed Shabri Bhakti. And so they became the aesthetic, climatic points, the poignant moments of the performance. And so they borrowed. And every Ram Leela, even Ramnagar Ram Leela, will have these episodes.
Sure.
And they are like Sulochana is a DTA. She's a Sati. So Sati is concept. So the Meghnad is, in fact, one of my colleagues were laughing because we have a student, one of these paintings, where the hand is, there and writing. So why would a hand do that? So that's very amusing. But that shows the power of this Sulochana as as a Sati, and it is on because of that power that she's able to get the head back, and then people have been fed on this mythology, and that kind of somehow they begin to relate, and
It
also
would be
it generates tears.
Yeah.
As any good performance should.
Yeah.
So you have tears and you have those lumps in your throat.
And a lot of humor at the same time.
And then you have humor, so you have a
and,
Kalnemi, and so
Yes.
so they are
It's
all,
a mixture of things.
when you are developing a performative text, you're drawing from what will make the drama.
Have you
succeed.
seen, because I'm very fascinated, we know we all live with this false myth that these are very old texts and they're very old enactments. Yes, at some level there's truth in that. And they are more or less like fixed, which is not true because they keep changing and they...
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, have you noticed any significant changes in the enactments of these episodes in the Ram Leelas that you've seen?
Because the very schedules are different.
Okay, yeah.
So you may not even have some of these episodes. Then you have Ram Leelas which are only for 7 days.
Right.
You have Ram Leelas. So
No, but I'm
obviously
saying within one context, if you happen to have seen, like you've seen the Keria Ram
the
Leela.
songs will be different. For example,
Okay.
the same Sulochana, the dialogues are actually happening on stage.
Right,
They are
right.
like spontaneous.
Okay.
Or you have these local people
Writing.
writing local drama. So even Yashwant Singh or Radhesham, they don't matter. You have poets, in every town.
Local poets,
who have their
yeah.
own scripts. So the dialogues will be different, the songs will be different,
Okay.
the way the emotions are
Okay.
being present. Like if you go to Bisipara I think it was Bisipara Ram Leela of Sarup Nakha, from Odisha. It is of Sarup Nakha, it is so lyrical and the music is so different, and so the whole atmosphere is, the body gestures are very, and at the same time, when the nose is cut, it's taken to the dimensions of, that Lakshman is has jumped onto her body, pinned her down, and it's very, but within that lyrical aesthetic thing, a very, very, very violent things happen. But you've also Ram Leelas where they want to avoid this. So there is only a kind of, there's no big show of her nose being cut.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a ritual gesture.
It's a ritual gesture. Even if you would see in Ramnagar, not Ramnagar, what you just saw in the Nakataya, if you forget the procession,
it's a passing moment.
You
It's not even see it.
You
don't even see it. Yeah. I'm going back to the seminar the conference that you had it was a very valuable conference, and I remember the discussion around Nakataya, and one of the persons was saying that the blood, that spurts, is seen as auspicious. But there's no blood that's spurting, at least in this enactment that we saw. It's just
there is blood because the nose become bloody.
Yeah, but it's not it's not like you're.
Because you see, she's carrying this one mortal kind of a thing, whatever it's called.
Pestle.
Yeah. And then she is like flinging it around. So, which in other Ram Leelas, here it may be red, whatever, but in other Ram Leelas, the pestle that she's carrying is she's splurting her blood. So this thing of splurting blood is there, and that is why I said that probably fertility is
one of the,
and maybe the origins of the cult go much deeper back than we realize that where it is coming from, and that's why I wouldn't like to read it purely as a gender.
Not at all. It goes it has many other.
And then people have, inversions are so much possible, because when you saw the Leela, the way she's kind of, she's making fun of Ram, and that license to indulge in a certain kind of behavior. Some Ram Leelas will provide, others may not provide. So that is also
So do you feel over the years the same time duration is at work, or are they getting abbreviated? Are they getting shorter? Are they, I don't know, it's hard to say.
No, I think they get abbreviated, maybe less and less Ram Leela and more of dances. It's possible. And I don't know, but that 7 days, since it's a ritual thing, so 7 days is the minimum. 4 days also, some places 4 days happen. So it depends from place to place, and to say that Ram Leelas are stopping.
No.
Even the fear that, Ramanand Sagar has killed the
It's
tradition.
Not true. It may have escalated.
It's regenerated. And it is only in the very big towns where you have access to funds and you can, that Ramanand has had an influence, but you just move outside the city space. And the rural Ram Leelas are being done in their own
way, with all the local resources.
Their own language, their own spontaneous dialogues. And
well, one of the areas of research that interests me are the local texts, the texts that they really hold on to for dear life, because that's their property, as it were. It's their authorship. In a sense, this is the irony for me, that Tulsi has been published in countless editions, so Tulsi is available. But these texts that they are holding on to are not...
See, because Tulsi's text is not about... It's not the essential text for Ram Leela. And so to kind of put both these two kinds of texts at the same level would be, I think, would be a mistake. Tulsi's text is coming to create a certain kind of devotional practice. And that ultimately the same text becomes the text for Ram Leela is fine. But before that also Ram Leela was happening and Valmiki's text was being used. After Tulsi also several other texts came to influence, even in the so-called, very, very ritual presentations. So it's the heart of that text that is present. as Tulsi's
Yeah,
text, but the actual
Chulteg.
text being performed could be any
Anything,
text, could be any text.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
And yet it's a
happening.
precious text for them because it's been written by the local poets of that particular locality, and they hold on to those. That's their.
Like in, say, for example, again, I'm going to Odisha because Odisha presents a different. So you have the Vishwanath Kuntiya's text, and where people can relate to those texts.
Yes.
And I was in both, and you'll be surprised that the text that they use for is, I think, Raghunath Das. Some other text they use. But while this is happening, they also have the Swarupas, the Jhankis and the temple where the Tulsi text is going on.
Okay.
So simultaneity
Yes.
of a ritual, religious rendering
And
of
a more popular.
of a more popular theatre.
And they are simultaneously
merge.
and sometimes
they
intersect.
converge also. It's not because in the north, now I don't know about Orissa because I've not really done so much work there. But when I come, so no matter what text is being performed, it is taken to be Tulsi's text.
Right. Right.
And I remember from my childhood that there was always like, my elders would think that the Ramnagar Ram Leela is the purest Ram Leela. And the Valmiki Ramayana is, so relationship of text is a very interesting.
Yeah.
And as the Valmiki recedes and Tulsi for Ram Leela or for the colloquial thing, the text itself becomes an avatar, because it's the
emanation.
All texts are the emanation. And we as scholars may then begin to look at whatever, but justifiably so, because you're looking at it from a different perspective. But from the perspective of the performance,
it doesn't make a difference.
Tulsi and it's
is one and the same. It's a one and the same.
It's the katha. Ultimately, it's the katha, and it's the same katha.
No, that's a very beautiful.
And the bare plot. It's the bare plot, and that's why it's again a jhanki.
No, I find that actually just dramaturgically very, very interesting. That you can have two texts, but it's not like they're doing. Ultimately, the function is almost one,
and it's one
that
text.
Is the
and it's still treated as one.
Just
text,
treated. Now, I wanted to go a little.
And there are actually not just two texts. There are several.
Several
texts.
others.
In fact, I should put. I have that. The Datya Ramayana. So there's Samvad Pustika. Then the rehearsal text.
Yes.
Then the Sohar Geets.
Those are
all those
would be very interesting.
I would put it on.
I think from an academic point of view, those
I
are
will be
really
putting that,
interesting. Now, it's going into an area which you haven't developed here because there's no space, as you told me, and that's puppetry. This whole dimension of what happens to the Leela concept when it is rendered through shadows and reflections. And here, of course, the one tradition I'm a little familiar with is Ravan Chaya, which is intriguing. Because that's probably, I don't know, maybe there are other performance genres with Ravan in it. I know there are episodes where Ravan's name is there, but to call it Ravan Chaya, this is this would need specific research, and why do we?
I think we got into that, and because it is shadow, but it could not be called Ram Chaya.
That's
Ram doesn't have the Chaya.
Being a god.
So Ravan Chaya doesn't necessarily make
it's
Ravan
about the,
central.
No,
Ravan
he's not.
In any case, is central to the story.
But he's not.
It is not in juxtaposition to Ram. And these were the texts which again developed. The text that they used that you've mentioned. Ravan Chaya here in the south, it is the Kamban Ramayana. So Vishwanath Kuntiya's text, which is used for the Ravan Chaya theatre. No, I do have shadow puppets. It's just that I'm not. Maybe I should add a little play also there in one of the screens.
Maybe just your video documentation. You've got so much.
Ravan Chaya is here on the video projection room. But as a separate screen, I'm not because the space. But probably, let's see. I'll talk to the designer, my designer, and see if we can create that space. So, actually, the shadow puppet arose out of the need to tell the story of Ramayana. And it did not tell any other story apart from Ramayana. Now, of course, the Mahabharata is being also used, and maybe other stories are, but it was the medium that was developed in order to, and maybe perhaps it was the oldest of the mediums of presenting theatre, and Ramayana being, because I think it's also concise, its plot moves in a particular way, it lends itself to the telling of the story and enacting it as always possible. So I suppose that's what related, but the necessarily calling it as, that Ravan Chaya could have a meaning specifically to the
Perhaps
figure
not,
of Rama
it's just,
is not there. It's not
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And but there is an interesting Leela form which is happening in Bisipara, I think, which is a tribal thing, and and it is that Ganjam district, so it's also next to Andhra, and you have this whole tradition of Ramayana being told. Kali is because the shadow puppet is being played, actually the theatre is being played to Kali, because who was absent during the Ramayana war could not be there, and she wants the story to be told.
Wow.
So they enact it to Kali.
Wow.
Here in the Bisipara, you have a huge, very sacred mask made of one whole huge tree trunk. And it's called Lankani, so you have Lankani episode, but Lankani here is a goddess, but her iconography is that of Kali, of the same as that from the Andhra, so there must have been, so at some point there was this goddess, the tribal goddess, got kind of, influence from the Kali image of the Andhra and now the entire Ramayana is performed to Lankani.
Wow. No.
Okay, so she is no more. So how these spaces are transcended, both in ritual as well as in performance in these theatrical
Well, it's just
spaces.
such an extraordinary device, because, I mean, in the most learned of epic texts, the interlocutor or the scribe makes all, who is it being told to?
Absolutely.
This is in a
so,
performance
when
form.
we say to a performance to an empty audience, there is to empty whatever spaces, as Stuart Blackburn says, is to miss the very point that it's not being performed for anybody.
That's true.
Actually, it's not being performed for anybody. You could just not be there.
Yeah.
And I will still perform Ram Leela because I'm not performing
it for
like Tulsi says, Swantai Sukhai, for my own pleasure,
for my own
bliss. So someone is present for whom he is doing. And if other shrotas have come,
well, it's interesting what Blackburn does, because he then goes behind the screen and then there's an audience out there. I've experienced this. It's very uncanny, I have to tell you, because we're habituated to thinking that theatre has to be performed for a live audience, even if it's one person. It doesn't have to be the case, and it's very, very beautiful.
And in these cases, probably not at all, because here Leela as an enacted form is not very distinct from Leela as sung. So Leela Anukaran is both the Leela which is sung and the Leela which is being performed. And I think at that level of ecstasy where if you were to reach, and I think every actor reaches that stage. It is different that how we want to name that experience. It's an aesthetic experience, or it's a Brahm experience, or whatever. But so at that level, probably
you see, I feel
something out there from me doesn't. Though I arrive at that state from the external, but once I've reached the eternal and the journey has become vertical and not horizontal,
then it's different.
We
don't actually know how to theorize that, to be honest. Because when I went for this particular shadow puppet, and all the lights went out and there was just darkness, there was something, and you just had these flickering shadows, and it's not virtuoso. It's a chant-like thing. It's in a language, of course, very few people would understand. And it's not trying to be funny or jocular, very static, So there's hardly a joy in a very obvious sense. but maybe at another level you're tuning into something else.
You're
You know,
tuning into-
a different significance for
your own,
for your own,
in whatever your body contains,
whatever, yeah.
you know, and whatever experiences.
That's a very difficult thing to find the language that is. This has been wonderful. Thank you. And so we'll continue the conversation tomorrow. Then you can take me once more through.
Vidyaya